your insight. We move on now, and the European Union's trade chief has said that the 27-member bloc is committed to securing a trade deal with the United States based on respect and not threats. This comes after US President Donald Trump threatened to slap a 50% tariff on all goods sent to the US from the EU. EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič has said that the EU is committed to securing a deal that works for both after a call with US Trade Representative Jameson Greer and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Trump first raised the issue of EU tariffs in an early morning post on his Truth Social network. He doubled down later in the day, telling reporters in the Oval Office that there was nothing the bloc could do to change his mind. While adding to this, Trump also denied that his tariffs would hurt American businesses. Let's listen in.
I'm not looking for a deal. I mean, we've set the deal, it's at 50%. But again, there is no tariff if they build their plant here. Now, if somebody comes in and wants to build a plant here, I can talk to them about a little bit of a delay. But, while they're building their plant, which is something I think that would be appropriate, maybe, we'll determine that.
Talks with the EU have failed to make much progress, with Brussels recently threatening to hit US goods worth nearly 100 billion euros with tariffs if it does not lower the duties on European goods. The EU is one of Washington's largest trading partners, sending more than $600 billion in goods last year and buying $370 billion worth, according to US government figures. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Ross Feingold, a political risk analyst, joining us from Taipei. Ross, as always, thank you ever so much for being here. Trump has made himself clear once again, saying that he doesn't want a deal with the EU. This, of course, contradicts comments that he's made before. Is this another ploy of Trump trying to push negotiations and a deal through, or do you think he has now resigned himself to the fact that a deal won't get done?
It could be both. So in the short term, he might impose 50% tariffs on goods from the European Union. That doesn't mean he doesn't want negotiations to continue. He wants negotiations to continue so that the EU gives him something that he could declare a victory. And that would have to be better access for US goods or US services into the European Union. From the figures you just mentioned, the EU has a very large trade surplus with the United States. That is something that does not sit well at all with President Trump. We know he doesn't like the European Union to begin with. So he's looking to get a better deal for the United States, which comes as no surprise. So he's making these threats of a 50% tariff on every good from the European Union trying to enter the United States. And it's up to the United States and the European Union trade negotiators to see if they could reach a deal.
Yes, Ross, we've heard from, of course, the European Union's trade minister, who said that these talks should be treated with respect and not threats. Does Trump's hardline stance risk alienating the US from a 27-country bloc?
Probably not. I mean, there's certainly some countries in the European Union that Trump has a good relationship with. Hungary is one, Italy is another. But ultimately, this is probably all about negotiations and Trump's negotiating tactics. So I think we should assume that Trump wants negotiations to occur. Again, that might mean in the short term he'll raise the tariffs on European goods to 50%. It does not mean he's against negotiations or reaching a deal. But there's going to have to be significant concessions from the European Union side in order to reach a deal acceptable to Trump.
Absolutely. Ross, looking at the relationship between the EU and Donald Trump and his administration, of course there have been points where it's been strained in discussions over the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. How pivotal could a trade dispute be in other global issues that are currently being dealt with by the US and the EU nations?
That's a really interesting question. So whether or not a deal is reached on trade, would it have carryover effects to other aspects of the EU-United States relationship? Actually, the answer is probably no. So Trump probably looks at these issues as very isolated within its own silo. I do think that Trump is willing to negotiate a trade deal with the European Union if there's concessions from the EU side. Does that mean that Trump would agree with the European Union on policy towards Ukraine and Russia or on other issues? The answer is probably no. So I think it's safer to assume that Trump looks at these issues in isolation and not interconnected.
Absolutely. And Ross, I want to end this discussion by bringing it back to Trump's tariffs and ongoing discussions. We've seen a deal agreed with the United Kingdom. We know a deal is close with India after multiple conversations, including JD Vance and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But given conversations are still ongoing with many nations, do you think this is taking longer than Trump thought it would? And do you think if we get to the end of this sort of 90-day 10% period that we will see his Liberation Day tariffs come into effect and hit global markets as they were planning to, which could, of course, cause shockwaves to the economy?
Despite the rhetoric that Trump might use from time to time, I think he knows that these negotiations are very complex and time-consuming. I don't think he assumes that the trade negotiations with any trade partner, whether that's the UK, India, the EU, or other trading partners like Japan or South Korea, Taiwan, I don't think Trump assumes that they'll take place very quickly. So I think he knows that these can be very complex and time-consuming. So again, maybe when the 90 days are up, he'll extend the discount for the European Union. He might impose the 50% tariff, but ultimately I think he's still willing to negotiate.
Absolutely. Ross Feingold, thank you ever so much, as always, for providing us your insight. That is all that we have time for, but we will be back very soon with more